The U.S. Supreme Court refused to block an order Monday to redraw Pennsylvania's congressional map. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court had ruled that the current districts are the result of partisan gerrymandering that favors Republicans. Right now, Republicans hold 13 of the state's 18 congressional seats. Analysts say a nonpartisan redrawing could put as many as 3 seats under Democratic control. Anthony Salvanto is CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys. Ilya Shapiro is a senior fellow in constitutional studies at the Cato Institute, and he joins me via Skype from Washington. Anthony, let me start with you. Let's start with a definition. What is gerrymandering, and can you explain its significance when it comes to U.S. elections?
Sure. It's a word everybody who follows the midterms from here out should get used to hearing. It's when partisans draw congressional districts within a state that favor one party over another. Now, there's a lot of reasons why those congressional districts you see whenever you look at a state map have all those fancy lines and weird shapes, etc. Part of it is just where people live. But if a partisan legislature or a partisan governor will draw those lines, or those lines drawn, so that a number of those districts tilt toward one party. They're stacked full of, say, either Republicans or Democrats, and the other party doesn't really have a chance to win, the argument goes, then those districts are considered to be gerrymandered, and that's really at the heart of this case and others like it.
So that's how gerrymandered districts can create this disparity between the number of votes a party receives in elections and the number of seats that they end up controlling.
Right. So in the Pennsylvania case, for example, now everybody knows this is sort of a 50-50 seat, right? It's been close in a lot of presidential elections, about as many Democrats as Republicans. But as you mentioned at the outset, Republicans control 13 of the 18 seats. That's the case in a lot of states where they've controlled the line drawing. It's the case for Democrats where they've controlled the line drawing. You know, the way that works is you see Democrats are sort of packed into districts. They might win a few seats, but they win them by 70 or 80%. Well, you only need 51%. So all those other votes are kind of wasted, is the language we use, whereas Republicans will spread themselves out a little more. So they have always just enough to win. And that's behind gerrymandering. And then what the court then comes back here and says is that disenfranchises people, essentially, that it doesn't give them an equal chance to have their voices heard in congressional voting.
Well, Ilya, let me ask you, the Supreme Court is leaving Pennsylvania's case to the state, but it is considering gerrymandering cases from Wisconsin, Maryland, and North Carolina. What are the implications of that?
Well, it's clearly a function of the Eagles Super Bowl win. No, it has nothing to do with that. It actually
you had to get that in there. Yes, we know Philadelphia won.
It has to do with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision being based on state constitutional law, Pennsylvania's state constitution, not a federal constitutional or other statutory decision. And so it's very easy in cases like that for the Supreme Court to say, we're not going to review that. The Pennsylvania Republicans tried to make the case that there was actually a federal issue, but if the Supreme Court thinks that there's not, or it's not important enough, then that explains why it didn't take it. In these other cases, Wisconsin, Maryland, North Carolina, I think Texas also has a districting case relating to Voting Rights Act claims. There are clear federal constitutional and statutory claims. And look, regardless, there's going to be enough for the Supreme Court to decide whatever standard it rules on by the end of June, that's going to apply nationwide. And that's why in Pennsylvania, lawmakers are in a bit of a pickle, because they could come up with something now. The Republicans, even if they come up with something that the governor agrees to, maybe that will no longer match what the Supreme Court says, what standard the Supreme Court puts in when it decides these other cases at the end of June.
Yeah. So, Anthony, how might this decision in Pennsylvania impact the 2018 midterms?
Right. The Democrats think, and if you look at the map, there might be maybe 2 or 3 more seats that would be in play for the Democrats in Pennsylvania. Everything is going to add up because we see right now somewhere between 20 and 30 very competitive House districts. And the Democrats need to make up the gap if they're going to try to flip the House, if they can win 24, 25 seats along the way. So 2 or 3 seats here and there is going to matter. You know, when you look at Pennsylvania, that's how it plays on the national stage. It's how we look ahead to November. And then you look at other cases, other states where it's possible the districts could be redrawn. And there again, things could shift by 2 or 3 seats here and there. All of that adds up because, look, most House races don't flip. Most House districts don't flip. So you start talking about 2 or 3 seats here and there, and it really matters, especially in a tight November.
Well, Ilya, Pennsylvania Republicans will be tasked with drawing new districts to be reviewed by Democratic Governor Tom Wolf. How does that process work, and what happens if they can't come to an agreement?
Well, each state has its own process, so you're right to ask how it works in Pennsylvania, because you can't extrapolate that based on wherever you might be watching this program. They will try to meet whatever standards to not have, I guess, as much of a partisan tilt per whatever the standards that the state Supreme Court decided. And if they can't agree between themselves, the Republicans in the legislature and the governor, then the court itself will step in and try to draw the maps. That's not the first time, and it certainly won't be the last time that the judges will, in effect, be playing cartographers and trying to draw these districts.
All right, Anthony Salvanto and Ilya Shapiro, my thanks to you both.